Speaker, the vision of the opposition was to remain totally insular, and that was it. That was the only change they were ever going to be able to bring. So first of all, I'd like to say that we refuse to accept the premise that democracy would only work if we have one unifying idea. We think that actually the democracy that they were trying to tell us that we had was a functioning democracy, because the democracy that we had was full of different perspectives, different ideas, different tensions that allowed a better overall outcome for every single individual currently living in Middle-earth that reduces the monopoly that dwarves and the others currently have over wealth. So I've got 2 points to rebuttal today, and then 2 points of substantive. So let's first of all start by addressing the issue of human advantage that they wanted to tell us would happen. So 3 points here. First of all, just be comparative, guys, because under your side of the house, humans are already the ones disadvantaged. Ben flagged that in a POI to you. They are poor and starving, like elves and dwarves. Sit rich, you said you were happy to stand for that, and that all was going to happen was there's going to be a gradual change. But that was something that we could also bring on our side of the house, because we could create gradual change as by democracy acting as the catalyst in that sense. And I mean, and you haven't given any reason as to why we should prioritize these beings over other beings. That doesn't make any sense. Even under the hardest characterizations, humans give the most lives and suffer the most, therefore they, deserve a little bit of priority to start with. Secondly, our model had an upper house that gave proportional representation to the species anyway, and that level counters the human advantage that may happen in the lower house or whatever. Thirdly, people are more likely to understand each other's interests in an open democratic forum. Your side allows all of these races to become insular and to ignore those concerns. So, secondly, on tensions making democracy hard to achieve. 3 points here again. First of all, we told you this was a unique time where unity and common understanding was at an all-time high because of the war they just faced against Sauron. It's hard to build that solidarity when the generations have passed, was forgotten, and that engagement has already been lost. We don't accept that secondly, we don't accept that having historically divided people means that we should abandon the quest for democracy. Many young democracies around the world start like this, but change over time. Why? Come on, it's self-explanatory. Thirdly, this is the answer, but also explanatory. Because many of the funds between these races don't hold up when there is engagement. Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas are all friends despite being of different races. And that works because of the fact that Aragorn is willing to accept these other people's races, and Legolas and Gimli begin to understand each other, begin to make that change. This is also true in the real world, in the real human world that we live in. Israel and Egypt are a classic example of 2 nations that previously hated each other, but post-trading engagement opened up and were then able to have a better understanding. You also think that understanding just increases naturally as you get to know someone, begin to understand their perspective and their side anyway. We also think that resentment they wanted to tell us would happen under a human rule, which we don't believe would happen, increases as well. Yeah.
Right. You wanted to champion competing interests. What if those competing interests are literally over the system you're seeking to implement?
It's just not important in my debate. I'm going to pass that to Ben apparently. Cool. So that's all. That's fine. So on to my substantive, which is first of all about stability regimes and how we create best outcomes for people, and thirdly about women in Middle-earth. So on stability regimes, the important thing to remember here, Madam Speaker, is that what stability regimes is dependent on having a singular good leader. If a leader dies in the world, Middle-earth, for example, if Aragorn was to die, then anarchy begins to reign. Because what we see is people with vague claims to the throne fighting to gain power, which creates massive instability for people living under that regime. Because there are disputes over who the rightful heir is. Often some leaders don't have kids and cousins fight, and then you have all kinds of bad outcomes. So what this means for people living under that rule is a decreased quality of life. Because first of all, they'll just be ignored while these people are trying to fight it out. But then secondly, probably going to see a civil war anyway. And then generally what happens when that kind of conflict happens between cousins, it changes over time, which means that that these people will be living under a constant state of moving ideas of what the kinds of lives they should be living are. And that's incredibly harmful for that stability. So on to the last point of substantive about women in Middle-earth. So the important thing to remember here is that women in this world are valued considerably less than men within that world. They don't receive as much education, they have no power, their voices are not heard at all. For example, Eowyn. I see you producer over, I'm right. Eowyn is a strong-minded, well-trained, incredibly intelligent woman, right? But she is the only one that we see in a series. But her biggest fear is actually actually a fear of not being able to ever make a change in the world. She wants to make a change, but she's unable to do, which we see when the men in her life literally repress her and don't allow her to fight against the people who are trying to repress her in the first place. So why can't the change for women happen under the status quo at all? We think that under a monarchical regime, people like Eowyn can never have any power because it's like monarchy, she's like in the monarchy, she's crowded out by men within that capacity. We also think that that monarchical regime places significantly more value upon men living under that regime because they are the ones who are able to inherit the power and move forward in that capacity while women are significantly still trapped. We think that under a democracy which we create, Eowyn is able to have a voice and she is able to gain power because she's well liked. The people of Rohan significantly respect Eowyn. She will probably be elected into this government. She will probably be able to make a change. And then it's important to note that the only woman who actually has power at all is Galadriel, who just happens to have power because of the fact that she's just a ring bearer, right? Which is fine. But what this means that in some cultures, women are already respected in positions of leadership, which means that when we have this cultural engagement, which will happen only under our side of the house, then women are more likely to be respected because you see Galadriel in power and you go, why can't I, as a dwarf woman, also be in power despite my amazing beard? So it's important to note, and so then what this means is that we create a flow-on effect for women within society. And we don't think that it necessarily needs a massive explanation because what are the benefits that happen when women become in power? We see better education, we see more women having better quality of life. We see women less likely just being forced to pump out 10 children, maybe able to have a career in some other capacity. We think that the fact that Middle Earth is living in a world that is for humans right now, is a couple of hundred years ago, allows us then to be able to look back and see the changes that will happen historically. Because the outcomes that we were able to give you on our side allowed for dwarves and elves to interact on a better level because of the fact that they were having more interaction with each other. And because women were going to have better lives, we're very proud to oppose.